to Katie Boeck, a singer-songwriter from Nashville.
But I'm leaving it all behind. Let my mind go somewhere new. Letting the old things die.
So, when did your love for music spark?
Man, I don't really have memories without music. I grew up sort of in a musical home. My dad played guitar, and even when my parents split up, both my households were really musical. So I grew up with an upright piano, lots of guitars, and we would always do family sing-alongs and stuff like that. So I always just loved it. It was always something I wanted to do. And my mom put me in dance, and I started taking singing lessons when I was 4.5 or something like that. So I think it's just always sort of been in there. And I know some family history stuff, my grandmother's from Germany, and I know that her grandfather was the director of the men's choir there, and so I think it goes back, and so it's just always sort of been a part of who I am, what I do.
Nice. I'm in Germany, right? I'm German.
Yeah,
I'm half German, half Italian.
I knew that. I thought I knew that you were in Germany. I thought you had mentioned that. Yeah, my grandmother's originally from 𝐅𝐸𝐻𝐽𝐽.
Oh wow, that's so funny. That's 3 hours from where I am.
Yeah, I've only ever flown through and stopped in Frankfurt, but I really want to go. Just to visit.
There's a lot to see for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so how come you decided to get a major in theater when you really grew up with so much music?
Well, it was sort of all integrated for me. I didn't really start writing songs until well into my teens, seriously. But I grew up doing community theater, so that was sort of my introduction to it all. So, I think from 5 years old, if you're in a local dance studio, the studio would put on productions and we would all be involved. And so that was really my life. That was my extracurricular activity that I would always do, and it just kind of kept going. And I had sort of an interesting and unique experience with a teacher. In 3rd grade, this woman would come to our school and put on a production every year. And then when I went to middle school, she started working there, and then I was part of the first graduating class of a brand new high school in my area, and she was the teacher there. So basically, I don't know if you've ever seen Boy Meets World. There's Mr. Feeney, and he sort of follows his students. We sort of had that, and a lot of amazing people kind of came through our program. It was just a special community, and then we had this amazing performing arts center that got built our junior senior year, and we got to do our main spring musicals in this amazing facility. And Zac Efron's from my area, Joanna Jones, who's in Hamilton on Broadway. There's just a handful of us that really thrived on that. So when it came time to apply for schools, I just said, I'm gonna apply to NYU, I'm gonna apply to UCLA, maybe one or two others, and actually I got into UCLA, and the vocal teacher that I had studied with for years and years prior ended up becoming the musical theater chair there. So I just got really lucky that where I was from and where I ended up, I just had a lot of support and community there, and so that's
nice.
That's the story.
Cool.
So you recently released your new song, Make Some Room, and it made me wonder, what are you making room for in 2021, and what are we leaving behind in 2020?
This is a great question. Yeah,
right.
That song, Making Some Room, I wrote it with a friend of mine here in Nashville named Cheyenne Metters, and it really took on this whole metaphor about that very thing, and it really kind of became it became about the psyche and about making room for new thoughts. And I think, I think in general for me and writing that song, most of my work recently has been around getting rid of limiting beliefs and just getting out of any sense of life is happening to me, or I'm a victim of anything. It's our thoughts are so powerful, and I feel the power of positive thinking like has just done wonders for me as I've transitioned from, you know, I became a mom recently. I'm getting out of a marriage. I've moved. I mean, we've all been through, like, I feel like micro, you know, life changes on top of all this like macro global stuff that's happening around us. And so for me, I'm making room for more grace with myself, less fear. I'm leaving fear and self-judgment behind in 2020, and just like really being conscious about the thoughts that I'm having and how those are directly related to, you know, my everyday happiness and wellness and joy and productivity and yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I believe in that too. I really believe in like putting things out there and thinking like positively about things, and like I really think that can affect the way you, at least the way you approach like life and your attitude and how it makes you feel.
All the people that I admire the most just have a really great outlook on life, and none of the people that I look up to are like, you know, sitting around spending all of their time complaining. Everyone's, you know, looking for solutions, and I think if we can do that first within ourselves, then we can go out into the world and make a positive impact.
So let's talk about, or maybe if you could talk a little bit about your writing process. How do you approach songwriting?
Yeah, process in general, I think, is such a great topic, and I'm so fascinated actually by like I've done some research like historically about composers, you know, how their process was, and I have a tattoo based on a mantra that Beethoven used to say, "Nulla dies sine linea," it means no day without a line, and I really adhere to that. I try to at least, you know, and I took a whole class on him, and I was just fascinated by his process, and he was sort of tortured, and his manuscripts were all, you know, scratched out and erased, and there were holes in them, and that was really in like great contrast to Mozart, who was sort of like it all existed here and it just like translated onto the page in these perfect, you know, symphonies. And as much as I would love to be that way, that's just not the kind of artist that I am. I wouldn't say that I'm tortured per se, but like it feels like giving birth. It feels like creating something new, and there's pain and there's struggle, and it's like really sort of arduous sometimes to get it out. And I found that the only way that I can really bring any like idea that I have to fruition is to just show up, like whether I feel like it or not, and just try to get something out. And so yeah, my process has really become about like daily devotion, and I do have some exercises. You know, musically, I feel like I have a lot that's sort of just flowing in my well, and melodically, like my first instrument is my voice, and so I feel like I can sing my way through any emotion. But when it comes to writing the lyrics, I have to be a lot more disciplined about that. Usually I'll get like a first verse and a chorus, but then that second verse like really requires it requires me to really sit down and kind of rack my brain about what actually I'm saying, and you know, and like how am I developing this story. So yeah, my process, I would say, is a bit tortured, but I've come to love it, because the opposite is worse. You know, not getting it out, not giving time to that part of me that needs to express, like, is so much more torturous than like just the process itself. You know.
So would you say, which touches on the next question, you start with a melody and then you write the lyrics, and like what meaning do lyrics have for you, like in a song? Because for me, I feel like when I listen to your music, I always see it's like I see a picture, but more like a movie. Like I have scenes in my head and like imagine, you know, and I have no idea if we're imagining the same, but I have like a version of the song in my brain. So do you have that as well when you're writing it, or do you know what story you want to tell?
I would say oftentimes the beginning, sort of like the spark, is sort of this meld of, it's like when I'm writing and I have a melody come out, like a word will just come, or it's sort of like a sound. It's like a vowel sound or something that, okay, I know that I want to sing this note on this vowel, and then a word will just come, and then that'll kind of invite me into an idea or an emotional space that I want to explore. And then I do really get down to the brass tacks when it comes to like the words, and it's the hardest thing for me about co-writing is that I am so particular about the words. And for me, like, I love to work in metaphor, and I really like things to come full circle. Like, I just know there's a feeling when I've written a verse that feels done. It's like, okay, that's done.
Yeah.
There's this beautiful thing that's been painted, and I've said everything I wanted to say. But, I have explored other things recently just because this whole idea about painting is really fascinating to me. And so I've been doing a lot of work with this particular book called Writing Better Lyrics. It's this guy named Pattison, and he has this whole thing about sensory writing. And so there's an exercise that I do often when I'm just trying to get started and kind of getting the juices flowing, where you do something called object writing. So it's like, pumpkin maybe is the word of the day, and then you sit and you describe the pumpkin and how it smells, how it might taste, how it feels in your hands, how it feels, how heavy it is. And that is like a great way, I think, to get into just like that kind of descriptive writing that you're talking about. So that's part of it. But yeah, then when it comes to the second verse and kind of wrapping up the idea, I do really think about it, and I use Rhyme Zone, and I get really into it in terms of what rhymes. But I heard something recently that was really cool. That was something about how, and this has given me a lot more freedom as a writer. I think maybe it was Bono talking about how it's actually really generous as a writer to sort of leave questions unanswered, or like narratives unresolved, because like you're saying, it kind of gives the listener a chance to complete it for themselves and to sort of bring meaning in their own way. So whereas I used to be the kind of writer that wanted to like very nicely wrap something up in a bow and it all sort of felt like a completed package, I'm getting more comfortable now with like just letting the song be a question and sort of a muse and a meditation, and I think that's unavoidable these days. Like, it's hard to know what's true, it's hard to know the answer, and sometimes the answer is the question.
Yeah, totally. And what advice, now you're talking about trying different like approaches, I guess, to songwriting, and like what advice would you give to a young musician who's only starting out to write songs? And it's one thing to write a song, but it's another one to perform it or put it like out there. And I think that's very like being very vulnerable and is a very scary thing in the beginning. So what advice would you have to young musicians to like overcome it or live with it or feel better about themselves?
This is a really good question. I mean, I've written tons of songs, and I still sometimes wake up and I'm like, I don't think I'm a songwriter. Like, I just can't do this, or everything sounds bad. But I'm going through the artist way again right now with a few friends of mine. We finally decided to do a journey through it. It's a book by Julia Cameron, and I mean, I love this kind of stuff. Like, I am all about the process. I'm all about getting in touch with the inner child, inner artist. Because I really think it's so valuable to the world when we do create. I think creation is the point of life, and everybody has the capability to be creative. That's what we're here to do. And one thing I've been really thinking about in doing this process is that, God is a term that some people shrink at and others embrace, but I think this notion that like, God can sort of take care of the quality and we just have to take care of the quantity. So it's like we show up to the page, we do our best to like honor the fact that we've been given this life and the opportunity to create, and like whether it's good or not is subjective. And I've also come to recognize that like it's really hard to like please everybody and still be authentic. And so I'm getting more comfortable too, like with the idea that like what I create might not really be for everybody, but I've had affirmation from enough people at this point to know that like what I make resonates. And I think if you're just attempting to articulate some sort of truth, it's inevitable that it will resonate with someone. And so it's okay if it's not everybody's cup of tea. Like, nothing really is. And like when you put it out there, if you're doing it to get validation, that might be a wrong reason. So I think it's important to just recognize like creating for the joy of creating is really all you need to, that's your why. You don't need to do it to save the world. You don't need to do it to be liked or loved, but it's just so fun to do, and nothing feels better. So yeah.
Just do it for yourself really at first, and then for everybody else. All right, so we're coming to the last question, and I started this interview thing with quarantine. So I always have like one quarantine related question in there because that's why I did it. So this has obviously been very challenging for everyone, but I think especially for the arts industry. So I was just thinking, as an artist, what have you learned from quarantine? How are you, I guess, adjusting to it as an artist and to the idea of, you know, the industry changing because of Corona? And yeah, just like your thoughts.
It's true. I mean, here in Nashville, it's been very obvious. Like, we've suffered some losses because I think a lot of musicians, you know, we thrive on being on stage, we thrive on being in community. And when that gets taken away, you know, there are repercussions. I think for me personally, because I had a baby 3 years ago, and so a lot of my life has been in isolation just because, you know, when you're a new mom, you don't get to go out as much, and you kind of have to you have to plan ahead of time if you want to, you know, get out and do your thing. So I didn't really feel a huge impact, you know, in terms of the way that I was living my life. So I felt like I was positioned really well to kind of to weather this storm, maybe a lot easier than maybe other people who were, you know, their lives were really integrated with going out all the time and just having that freedom. But that said, I think it's really important for artists to be able to sort of sit with themselves and go inward and really get in touch with who they are when they don't have all of that. And I think we can really come to identify ourselves with our achievements. We can come to identify ourselves with how other people validate us, how productive we are. And so I think for me, it's actually been really good because I used to sort of have FOMO. It's like I had a new baby and I was like, oh, the world's going on without me and I'm not able to, be as productive and I'm not getting things done. And now that's like, okay, well, that's everybody's reality now. It's like, I'm sort of getting like, I'm okay with the fact that like my life is my work of art, and I don't want to spend it like feeling inadequate because I'm not achieving. And so I'm sort of trying to recalibrate how I create and know that like I'm inherently valuable. I'm inherently, you know, I have these skills and talents, but they're not my identity per se.
Yeah.
And so sort of like detaching from my identity as an artist and then just like coming to a space of creation from, like I said, sort of the joy of it and the feeling like, okay, I actually just need to do this because it's what makes me feel alive, not because I need to put out another single or put out a new piece of content and make sure people know that I'm still here. And I've actually been more productive, I think, with that new frame of mind. I had sort of gotten myself into a negative headspace, feeling like I needed to kind of keep up. So I think there's been many gifts from this quarantine. Obviously, it's been really hard, and the longer it goes, I think the harder it gets to sort of find the silver lining. But I really encourage artists to kind of just like surrender to what it is, not be in resistance to it, and let it be a space of incubation where, you know, ideas, I really look to nature to kind of like help me make sense of my life. And, you know, ideas need to root down and they need to be nourished, and then that's how they grow and turn into you know, a little seedling and then into a flower. And so, I think we live in seasons and we live in times where we're less outward, projecting ourselves outward, and then there's times where we are in the spotlight. And so this sort of collective time where we're just kind of like incubating and getting to know ourselves apart from whatever achievements we've come to identify with, I think is really healthy. And I'm excited for when we can get back out there to sort of see what everybody has been working on and creating. And if it's not anything, that's fine too, you know. I think just releasing the expectation.
All right, that's it for today's episode. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video and make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on the next episode. Bye!